I'm Jean Marc Ah-Sen, and I wrote a book called Grand Menteur. The book is about Mauritian street gang, specifically one gang called the Sioux Gang, and they're kind of like a penny ante band of like vandals and racketeers. They don't do very well, to say the least, and they really love compartmentalization. Each person has got to stick to the confines of what they've been assigned. The eponymous Grand Menteur, he's the big liar, and what he has to do is fall behind on the getaway to get caught by the police to buy time for the others. He's also involved in writing alibis. The main character is his daughter, and when the Menteur emigrates to England and then to Canada, she's just trying to make sense of that heritage because she only spent for a very short time in Mauritius, so she has no real understanding of that country other than secondhand knowledge. So she's just trying to make sense of where she fits in and all that. It's an African island off the eastern coast of Africa, just east of Madagascar. It's been the colonial plaything of the Dutch, the French, and the English. So the entire history and the language that has developed in Mauritius is actually like a confluence of all those things. There's Portuguese in it, there's French, and Creole is kind of a spoken language. It doesn't exist in any written form, and those who do choose to write it, they can't agree on how to write it. And it's kind of fallen out of favor. Like the last time I was there, which was a few years ago, it was almost as if they had a chip on their shoulder. It's like they would rather you speak English or French. They don't want to be speaking Creole, but in their households they probably are speaking Creole. So it's an interesting place to set a book in, I think, because outside of Mauritian fiction and literature, I don't think there's too much exposure to that locale. I'd like to place my work in the tradition of comic literature. I really like Anglophile writers. So Edith Sitwell, Smollett, Fielding, Keith Waterhouse, everything by Joe Orton, I really like. Um, so all those writers, I think they, on top of being very humorous, possess a really strong command of language, probably a tendency to prolixity, and I like that, and I feel that it gets a bad name, just because it's like super garbled in like technical language. I think that if used properly can produce a really stimulating aesthetic effect that I would like to be able to, participate in. Like, language to me is like a matrix in which people develop their culture, their identity, and what happens with the main character in the book, because she's kind of pinballed around to different parts of the world, is she kind of has access to the language as a way to fit in or a way to be ignored. So you'll see her kind of clumsily use British idioms or French idioms, and sometimes she excels at it, for the purpose that people will gloss her over, right? It's not someone you want to take notice of. She's trying to keep a low profile. She wants to fit in, so she's going out of her way to kind of excel in the new places she's been thrust into. There are significant portions that are entirely in Creole, but then are later translated. It'll be translated if it's integral to the plot. Occasionally, it filters in through people bickering. A lot of it is phatic language. A lot of them are vulgar jokes that don't really enhance the book in any way. It's not necessary to understand Creole, although a savvy reader could probably look it up, or someone who has a smattering of French would probably be able to pick out like how de l'eau, water, becomes gilo, stuff like that. I think keen readers will be able to pick up on. The article, which came out a few years ago, though well intentioned, is totally farcical. It was written surrounding I guess in the wake of healthcare reform in America, and he was kind of putting up Mauritius, because they had universal healthcare, as like a paragon to be modeled after. I think anybody who spent more than the superficial amount of time in Mauritius can see that it's riddled with problems, sex trade, drug trade. So to me, it was just really humorous that someone would be setting up totally like a comparison between two different economic paradigms. So that was in the back of my mind when I wrote the book. There's no direct counterpoint. I mean, I'm not an economist by any stretch of the imagination, but it was in the back of my mind that Mauritius being primarily known for like a touristy area, that you could get one sense of the country by going to like Flic-en-Flac or Grand Bay and not have any understanding of the slums or the shanty towns, or like this unspoken rule that after the sun goes down, it's not a good idea to go outside in Port Louis because the only two people who are going out are dope fiends and Johns trying to score. So that I was trying to counterbalance some of the like the edgier aspects of Mauritian life with this kind of rosy version that Stiglitz had presented. The book had initially begun as another book called In the Beggarly Style of Imitation, and the conceit of that book was to do each chapter in a different style. So there's like an epistolary chapter and a section on aphorisms, like a thing on diasporic fiction. So that kind of informed why the narrative breaks in like, sometimes in years or tones. There were tonal shifts. And then when it was decided that I would be expanding on the Mauritian cycle of stories, I thought I could use that structure in a way that made sense for the book. And the idea predominantly was that as you move through time, her language is evolving, so she'll pick up different idioms and totally reject others that had, kind of was totally on the surface for other chapters. So that was the reason why it was going to be a period piece, I guess, because you could see tonal shifts from the 60s into the 70s or things that were popular, or certain attitudes. So I thought that was a great way to underpin, the story about Exodus and like the immigrant story. The shadow of Mauritius looms large over her, and I mean, she's never been there, really. It's all been recounted by her dad or her friends or the gang members that she interacts with. It starts off there is that pining, but later on I think she realizes it's a fool's errand to kind of yearn for a place that doesn't exist, really. Like, I mean, if she goes there, it'd be a different story, but she doesn't have the means to do that. So I think about halfway through the book, she totally abandons the project and starts immersing different cultures, namely the British one. And then when she's kicked out and booted off to Canada, that kind of mixes in with Canadian like Canadian rhythms of speaking or idioms, and I think that's probably a good way to think about it. After 17 months in Exeter, then 4 in Staffordshire, follows half a year in a parky bedsit in South Harrow, ending finally in a doomed stint back in Loughborough Junction. I'm on my back foot and packed with my gear. I was to stay with the only family I knew to bear a loose relation to on the other side of the world. Everything was arranged very hush-like, while Serge took an early bath from the chalk farm train turntable he was working at renovating. Expected back in Port Louis by relatives, Serge said things would get squared between us despite the travel visa papers humming a bitter, naked elegy of our lives. We moved fast in the few days left us, selling off our things as best we can, which means for practically any amount below asking. Serge had been prepping the floors of the turntable for striated tile conversion or some such thing. Someone had the bright idea to forego the white spirits entirely and accelerate the job by using flamethrowers to heat up the tar beneath the old flooring. Serge had a hand in this, I could tell, because he and his mate would collect the tar by the chuckful and sell it off to longshoremen who might want to use it for oakum or peddle it as a cheap, unreliable sealant for boats. I couldn't be bothered to find out. Off his nut Serge was, but wellspring of a good motive, it was hard to say otherwise. It's my last day before I'm supposed to fly out to stay with the family of one of Serge's bimbos he busied himself with while my mother was in Stonehouse, getting sterilized and rubbed up by other patients. Serge says there won't be time or money to see her off this time, that she wouldn't notice to begin with. There's always time, he says, time most of all to make up for time lost later on. That was always in our abundance. I have a handful of knockouts in my bag, my plane ticket, passport, and Malbar's codex. I check my things every now and then to make sure they're still there. There's always the niggling feeling before a trip that it's all withered away somehow, and only kept intact by repeated readings and analysis. I'm with my mates Christian and Annalie, who are brother and sister, in Brockwell Park while their otterhound Scooter is not half mucking about as much as we usually give him credit for, chasing the passers-by. I promise Chris and Anna will write them. They know how much I hate sitting still for anything, so we're making the very best of whatever teeny-weeny gobs of time we have left. I give Christian all my 45s and Annalie my air guns that I'd collected in the past year. It'll be an impossible collection to rebuild in Canada. Generally a very sad time for us all in all. It's patched with silences of every noble variety, but we're enjoying the sandwiches their mom has packed for us to no end. It always made me sad that I could never seem to hold on to anyone for longer than a fixed span of time, a few months tops, except old Serge. Even when I tell myself that not all relationships are meant to stand shoulder to shoulder into the eternal, and that the longing I feel is normal because you have inklings of realizations on some level before you actually understand them in your head, I still feel an incompleteness in my heart that I won't continue to see Chris and Anna. I'm in this mercurial frame of mind when we see the horrendous accident. A motorcyclist gets ramrodded by a weaving motor that fails to come to a full stop. The cyclist makes a churning arc in the sky, like a plastic soldier you flick with your thumb, while the bug starts to break. Soon thinking better of it, the driver then hammers the gas and turns down a narrow gunnel, screeching metal and sparks all the way in like a tight bugger. The sound of backfiring thunder is already turning into an echo before the body slams onto the paved road. It's like the sound of 100 doorknobs clattering in a rucksack as they skid down a flight of stairs. Christian is first on his feet. Scooter follows shortly after, while Annalie and I tarry a bit to collect the most important valuables about us, she her shoes, and myself my pack and my glasses. You develop this kind of hesitancy when you grow up the way we do, always a look over the shoulder, even when you witness someone a touch from joining the great majority. Christian is kneeling over the body, trying to unfasten the woman's helmet when we reach him. The weight's been impacted in her face. I can tell what is left of her jaw is obstructing her breathing, which comes out as suppressed whistle. It's stuck. I think she's going to choke, Christian says. I'll get some help. Annalie lets her feet carry her away, leaving Christian and I to wonder over things. The bastard, Christian mutters. Don't worry, help's coming. Even as he says this, I can see the skittering regret in her eyes. She'll never fulfill that promise stored deep within her. She can tell by the look on my face that her sooty mugs will be the last unfamiliar sight she'll take away with her. Some comfort. This is running through my head as we see this life slowly ebb away from her body.